Hi my loves, how's it going? How you guys doing? Welcome back to another video, or welcome if you're new. So it's a funny time for me to update my reading challenge or shelve it scrap it series, or like reading my TBR, whatever you want to call it. I feel like there's so many versions of this out on YouTube, and essentially it is a shelve it or scrap it series. I initially started to watch stuff from, I always forget her name. I think her name is Riley Marie. I love her energy, and I loved her concept of going through her entire like TBR through within like a year. Obviously, I can't do that because I have so many books, but also because I'm such a slow reader and I'm like kind of working myself out of a reading rut. Whereas I feel like she does get through like a decent amount of books a year. She has said herself that she can read up to like 100+ books within a year. I just can't, I'm very slow. But that being said, I'm so excited to finally sit down and film an update for you guys. I feel like if I don't sit down now to do it, it's going to be literally a year since I last recorded that video. And that is going to annoy me so much because I really wanted to sort of like keep on top of this project because I thought it was really fun. So it's finally time for me to update you guys. So before I start, also I am sat on the floor. Usually you see me sat on my desk, and today I thought I'll just do something a little bit different. I'll sit on the floor because it just feels a little bit more comfortable to do so. But I have finally sat down and gathered my numbers. So I had to go through, and as of like the 1st of January, my collection stands as total books that I own is 332. I'm sort of surprised about the number, but not really, because I actually thought I would have had close to 400 at this point. So I'm kind of glad it's a lot less than that because it feels a little bit more manageable. Of those books that I currently have, 59 of them have been read. The reason it's as low as 59 is because a lot of the books I have read in the past, I have used just unhauled them. So they have like either been passed over to younger cousins, I've donated them to the local charity shops. So I've gotten rid of a lot of the books I have read because I knew that after I've read them, I'm not really gonna like keep them. So all the books so far that I have read are all the books that I actually want to keep, or mostly want to keep. And what's left over is, are you ready for this figure? Oh my god, is 273 books, give or take one or two, as my TBR. So that's a lot of books on my physical TBR, and it's gonna take me like years at this point to sort of like get through that. And it is what it is. So as I was saying, I have 273 books, give or take one or two. So I might have like miscalculated a shelf or two, especially the ones that are like super duper stuffed. But that's the amount of books I have on my TBR. So I also kind of came to the realization, especially during 2024, that I don't like having too much of anything. I don't like the visual noise. I don't like visual clutter. It really sort of, the chaos makes me ill essentially, and it does not help when I'm having my depressive episodes. So I've decided to sort of like this year trial the no buy, and this pretty much is a very like sort of experimental year essentially, and the goal is I'm not to buy any new books. I can eventually treat myself for my birthday, but even that has to be within limitations. So either financial, like either there's going to be a price point set up, or it'll be like a maximum number of books I can bring in. At the moment, so far since I've started the no buy, I've not brought in any new books, which is quite nice. The last time I brought in books was when you last sort of saw that haul, even though most of the books I had been collecting before my actual birthday. So I was kind of like on a semi no buy anyway for a while. But yeah, that kind of all being said, I really wanted to talk about all the books I have read so far, and to just let you know if there's anything that I'm gonna be like unhauling from what I've read, if I'm DNFing anything, stuff like this. The goal is for the end of the year just to read as many books as I can, and to make sure that I only keep books that I truly love, that I will probably repurchase, that I want to keep for my kids potentially. I don't know, we shall see. But I just want to keep a hold of books that I truly want to keep, and I just want to read what I already have, because I have so much. The first 4 that I've read so far are all books I'm going to keep. These are all from shelve. These are all part of like a series that I was reading, and these are books I think 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm currently reading book 8. I read the first 3 books, and this series I actually started reading when I was like in year 9, and I think I was like what, 13 at the time, probably close to 14, or that was the age range for like year 9s. But the problem was, because these were from my English teacher's like closet, somebody was stealing all those books, so I just about got to read like the first book, and I think I read like the first chapter of the second book before the books got stolen. Literally every single one was gone, and it was so sad because I was so like, I actually like fell into the world and I loved it so much, but it was such a shame. And since then I've always said I'm gonna repurchase these books, or purchase these books for myself, and I'll read it. And I finally did last year. Finally purchased them because I found a good offer on them, and I've read these books and I'm so happy about them. So it basically follows a young boy who has become an orphan. He without kind of spoiling too much, but he essentially finds like a new tribe of people. He has a lot of hardship that he has to go through, and sort of every book there's like a new intense sort of thing that happens. So either there'll be illnesses or someone who's really evil that they kind of need to like defeat, or just different things like that. It's literally a boy, a wolf, and one of his best friends. And yeah, it's a really good like book series. I think this is perfect for like teens to sort of read. It's a good like sort of fast-paced, very entertaining book. I love each and every one of them, because each and every one of them are, even though they follow the same characters, you still get to meet new characters, and you get to like sort of re-meet some of the older ones. Like you might have met somebody in like book 2 and you get to meet them again in like book 4 or something like that. And it's really interesting to see his relationships with everyone around him, and like how stubborn he is, as well as his friend, and kind of like the relationship that they have, the relationship he has is with his pack brother, which is a wolf. But yeah, it's really good book series. The first one that I read was Outcast. Loved it. I think the first chapter was a little bit slower, but then it picked up really quickly after that, and I really enjoyed this. Then it was Oathbreaker. I can't actually remember too much of what happens in a lot of these books because I feel like I read them a while ago now, and I'm just kind of like sitting to film this episode like months later. But this was another really interesting one. I think this one was another one that sort of like started off a little bit slower, but then the pace of these books picks up really fast. So either with these books, I've noticed that you'll either from like the get-go it's going to be really intense, or like the first chapters will be like a little bit slow, but then it'll pick up and it'll be so fast-paced that you want to just continue reading. The only issue I have is I tend to read before I go to bed, and when you're tired there's only so much you're going to be able to like read and remember. But I really enjoy these. Eventually I will be rereading them, but yeah, love these so much. It was so good. The last book of like the original series, which was 6 books, was this one, which is Ghost Hunter. This was intense. My heart was constantly racing. I thought, this has happened, that's happened, I'm not going to meet this character again. Like some of these were just, it was constantly like, I couldn't put my book down. Literally, like I think I read this book in like 4 days. I literally split it into like 4 parts, and I flew through it when I did. Loved it so much. And initially this is where the series would have ended, but then years later she released like 3 additional books, and so far I've read one of them, and this was Viper's Daughter. This was quite interesting. At first I thought, oh, it's a bit silly that she's released like 3 of the books, but when I read through this I was so happy, because it shows the characters 2 years later to the last book, and just kind of like the growth, and like a lot of the like kiddish characters are still with them, and just how things were. It's really nice to sort of like read. It just felt kind of nostalgic, but that doesn't make any sense because literally like I read the other book like not that long ago, but it was so good. And I think she did a really good job with writing, because I feel like a lot of authors, if they write books that are like that has a young voice, so like the character is a child or like a teenager, they don't do justice to the character, and the voice or the tone for like, the book isn't really well done. But I feel like every single one of her books is so nicely written. that it does genuinely feel like it's a young person, and you can kind of really pick up on that, and I really enjoyed this. So I'm so happy. I've so far read like up to book 7, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. So far, all of those books are books I'm going to keep no matter what, and I've actually got a designated space for that already on my bookshelf, so that's great. Then the other 2 books that I've read that I'm going to be unhauling are these 2 books. This is one that I read first, and literally while I was really sick over last weekend, I kind of just sat down and I thought, okay, rather than watching YouTube because I'm so sick of it, or watching TV series, let me pick up a book. And I'd already made progress on this last year, but then I kind of like just stopped reading for like a few months, and I decided to pick this back up again. This is a good book. It's full of different authors. They've all written like a different chapter. It's essentially like a short, potentially like an essay, I suppose you can kind of say with some of these. This is not a bad book. I will say that it's really important for minority groups to consistently share their struggles and things that they've had to face and go through, because it kind of shows other people that actually they're not alone in facing these. A lot of the times I was going through this book, I was like, even though like I'm from South Asian heritage, that's where my family's from, and that's my ethnic background, a lot of these other books that maybe had to do with other cultures and other like races, I could still relate to aspects of that as well and completely understand. Some of these were like not too greatly written, but some of these were really, really funny, and they were so well written, and even like it was like a mishmash of stuff. It was not a bad product. Like altogether, it was not a bad book. I think I rated it like 2 or 3 stars, or like I think it was like a 3.5. I'm not really sure, but that being said, the only reason I'm letting it go is because I know that I'm personally not going to reread it again. A lot of the times, any sort of fiction books that I have, they always get passed forward because I've read it once. It's very unlikely for me to reread it again. So I know a few people who I can pass it on to. Usually my older cousin, because he likes to read a lot of like non-fiction as well. I think he might enjoy this, or at least somewhat enjoy it. So I'm going to pass it over to him. But he's going to have to wait till the end of the year when I do my entire like unhaul video. But you guys, I guess, can get a sneak peek to some of that. But this is one of the books that I'm unhauling. Not because I hated it, just because I've already read it. And I know that I'm not going to reread it again. But yeah, I do think if you can get your hands on it, I would definitely recommend you reading it at least once, because I think it is important to continue to listen to voices from minority groups. But yeah, that's all kind of want to really say about that. And the last book I've actually read, and this again I've read over the weekend when I was really sick, and I tried to just fly through the book. Michael Morpurgo. This is probably the first book I have read from this person, and this was not a bad product. This was actually really well written. One thing I noticed again is authors who are grown-ups that can write specifically with the tone of like a child, if the character is really young, and if for them to portray it really well is quite nice to see. However, I do feel like at the same time his child sort of the tone when he was a child sort of continued throughout to the end of the book, even when he was like a teenager. So I feel like that sort of didn't, like, as the character grew, tone and like of the book didn't really grow to sort of match that. But it was still a good book. I don't remember how much, like, what the rating was. I just don't see myself going ahead and rereading this again. Obviously, I think if I read it when I was in school like everybody else, I probably would have given this a much higher rating and I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But because I was in like the top set of English and I still managed to like not do so well, but my teacher, we had like different books and this just wasn't the one that picked for our class. But I feel like everybody else had like read the book at some point. It was just our group that didn't. So I feel like if I'd read it like back when I was in like year 9, 10 or 11, so between the ages of 13 to 16, I probably would have seen this very differently to seeing it now as like an adult. And I'm like 27 now, so that's like a good like decade plus. So yeah, it's not a bad book. I definitely would say that if you're young, read this. I think as a younger person you might enjoy this a lot more, but it was still a pretty good book. The ending pissed me off though. and it made me cry. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you do that? But I also think that the historical part of this book, it was needed to know, because that was something I didn't actually know, and that wasn't something that I was taught either. So I think that was really good to see. It basically follows a bunch of siblings. One's got, I think he's severely autistic, and he's on like the spectrum, and they're all boys, so there's three of them. There's the actual person, his name is Tomo, and then it has his older brother Charlie, his autistic brother whose name I forget, and it follows them, and it kind of goes through when he first sort of started school, sort of like progressing, and then meets somebody else along the way, and she becomes really close friends with them, and it kind of just follows through over like several years, and it was a good book. But yeah, I don't see myself ever rereading this again, and I do think my younger cousins who are 16 and under would probably enjoy this a lot more. So this is going to be another book I'm going to be unhauling, but obviously that pile will be shown at the end of the year. But I'm just glad I was able to read this when I did. So far I have read 6 books, and I'm unhauling 2, which is fantastic. I think I already included the books I've read, except for the last 2 books, in my read thing. So I probably won't update these figures until like mid-year, and it'll be nice to see sort of what I have by then. But the total will remain the same until the end of the year, just because I want to see how much I read and how much I'm unhauling. But I'm not going to count unhauled books, I'm just going to leave that to the side and deal with it later. But I do have a plan of reading a few other books, and so far these are the 3, because I've already started these 3. This is the one I've started like months and months ago, and I never found my way back to reading this, because I feel like sometimes this is really good, but then sometimes in some parts it just feels really boring. But this is a whole new world. It's a twisted tale. It's a spin-off of the Disney movie, essentially. This one follows oh my god, Aladdin and sort of that world. I always forget her name, the princess, which is so bad. But it's been interesting. I think of these books, I probably won't keep all of them. I might just keep this one, because it's actually quite nicely written, and I really do enjoy this. And I feel like I've always sort of gravitated towards Jasmine and Aladdin in their sort of story, but just because it was like the closest thing to like my sort of culture that we've ever got from Disney, and that we'd probably ever get, even though it was twisted anyway. But still, I do need to kind of get back into reading this and finishing it. And so far I'm like only on page, I think like 72, and there's well over 300 pages. Yeah, it's almost a 400-page book, so I do need to pick up my pace a little bit and get back onto reading this. But we'll see. At some point I have thought about maybe DNFing it, but then when like the characters start to get a bit funny, and it's just nice to read it. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully by next update I've made some progress on this book, because that would be nice to see. Another book I started was Skin Taker, and this is book 8 in the Chronicles of Darkness, but I just call it the Wolf Brother series because that's the name of the first book. So this is like book 8, and I think I've just literally read 1 chapter. Yeah, I just read the first chapter of this book, but I need to really get back into it, because I know that the second I pick this book up again and I'll start reading like the hour before I go to sleep, I'm gonna be wanting to like continue reading and just fly through the book. So I kind of need to pick this book up again, and this is book 8, so I've got 1 more book left after this, and it'll be really nice to sort of like finish this book as well, because that would just mean that I'm close to like finishing the series. And this is probably the only one series in a long time that I've read like consecutively, or like at least read it like close back to back to each other, rather than reading 1 book at a time, and maybe like 1 book every year or something, and reading other books in between. So it'd be nice to sort of like finish the series as well. So I'm looking forward to like diving back into this world. Another book I've started reading, this is like years old. This is Love, Aubrey. This is by Suzanne Lafleur. And I'm on page 48. I think there's like it's like 260 book pages in here, and I'm very close to DNFing this book already. It's pissed me off so much. This is supposed to follow the voice of a child. This is a young person, I think they're around like 12 years of age. I don't like the way it's written. I don't like the tone that's sort of carried throughout the book. I do think it's sad what happened to her. Essentially, her dad and her sister passed away because they were in an accident, and then her mum disappears on her. That's pretty much all I know, and her grandma comes and takes her home. But it's just the way that it's written, and some of the stuff that you've got to kind of figure out yourself. It's not always very clear, and it's just been quite annoying to read this so far. I just don't like the writing style of this book, and the fact that even though the actual character is such a young person, you can't, the tone doesn't sort of reflect that part of it, and it seems very like monotone to me, and it's just really boring. So I'm very close to DNFing this. I might give this one last go tonight and see how it goes. If not, this is going to be DNF'd. And this is the first book, I think, in a long time that I will be DNFing. And if I do, again, 100% unhauled, but it will just go to one of my little cousins if they're interested in reading this. But these are the 3 books that I want to sort of focus on over the next couple of months. If I start reading the way that I was reading at some point, like from July and August, I will have to do another update for March. But let's see how this goes. For now, I'm just going to focus on those 3 books and see where things carry me. So behind me, you can also see probably some of the books that I have, and these are all on my TBR for 2025. I obviously probably won't go through all of these books, but as a collective, those are all the books I want to kind of go through by the end of the year, and I'll just, all my TBR, it will just be on this dresser. But I don't like that there are so many at the moment. There's 40 books there. 40 books there, but my goal is by the end of the year to have no more than 10 books left over. So let's see how that goes. But that's everything for this video. I think this is going to be a lot longer than some of the feature like episodes, just because it's like sort of like months of like not reading. But let's see. I might try to sort of like actually like read these books along the way and kind of like give updates while I'm reading, similar to what some of the other book talkers or booktubers do. But we'll see how it goes. But I hope you guys liked this episode. If you have any recommendations or things that you think I can improve on while filming this, or things that you'd rather see, please let me know, and I will try to update you guys more frequently with this project. So let's see how all of that goes. But anyway, thank you so much for stopping by and listening to me ramble.